Okay, hello and good morning. So excited to have everybody here. I'm Jessica Vaughn, and in this panel conversation, we just kind of wanted to take some time to talk about, as developers, how is it that we can manage our careers? And specifically speaking, I think that I was saying to you all, like my inspiration was there was a time in my career where I definitely felt like guided along my journey, and I took that for granted, and so I noticed that I was starting to stagnate, like, and I'm a go 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 type of person, so I'm like, okay, you're not giving me enough, to chew on. But then I realized that a lot of my managers, especially on technical teams, they were great, they were awesome mentors, but they didn't have plans in mind for my own strategic growth, right? And maybe it's not their responsibility. So I started to just kind of take that matters into my own hands, and I thought maybe we all could have a conversation about that, like how you're able to do that in your careers and tips for folks, and maybe we can even learn some things from each other. So that's our inspiration for today. So we could briefly introduce ourselves. I'll let you start, Lawrence, and go around the room, the table, and then I'll go last.
Sounds good. Good morning. So my name is Lawrence Lockhart. I'm a software developer at FedEx, where we help manage the sortation of all of our sorts around the world, everything domestically and a lot of global ports as well. That's my 9 to 5. After hours, I spend a lot of time helping other adults make transitions into tech, just like I did 5 years ago, coming from the restaurant business of all things. So pretty full plate.
Great. I'm Jessica Tai. I'm an engineering manager at Airbnb, and that's my day job. My volunteer work is for Students Rising Above. I do the curriculum development and teaching there for getting underprivileged students exposed to tech and like their first introduction to coding.
Okay, there's a theme, there's a theme.
Right.
I'm Steve Buchanan. I'm a principal program manager at Microsoft, and I work on Azure, focus on improving it. Big Kubernetes guy. And that's my 9 to 5. Other stuff I do, I'm a Pluralsight author of books, speaker, and do stuff in the community too. So I work with orgs like Blacks in Technology, BDPA, and I've started working with organizations around tech for youth. So helping minorities get exposed to tech and trying to just help them see themselves in this career field.
I'm feeling really at home with y'all right now. So I'm Jessica Vaughn again, and I am a software engineer by trade, but I have always taught along my journey. And so I have taken a boot camp, but also have been a boot camp instructor for many years, do still teach with some programs now, primarily spending a lot of my time in the nonprofit space. So have a nonprofit that I run with a co-founder, which is Detroit Black Tech. We have our Hacking with the Homies conference, so we really focus on skilling up and focusing on the Black and brown developers and making sure that our careers are catered to. And then with Girl Develop It, we focus on helping women and non-binary individuals just transition into tech and have a safe space and comfortable space to come and learn. So it's like, we got to talk more after this. But just to start it out, I was wondering, could you all just kind of cover maybe like one particular experience that might stick out to you that, where you felt like maybe the management wasn't well for you, or kind of what was that moment where you realized like, okay, I need to do this a little bit more strategically for myself?
For me, it's actually kind of the start of what brought me here, my public speaking journey. I had a New Year's resolution for myself to get into public speaking because I was terrified of it. And I had told my manager, this is what I want to do. This year I want to have a solo presentation where it's just me up there and I need to be talking to a crowd and just kind of get over that fear. And I ended up applying to some places, and I got into one, and I found out later through a back channel that my manager tried to get on my talk.
Oh, wow.
And tried to put his name on, he didn't do any of the work of creating the content, and so I kind of lost that trust there that he was advocating for my career, my personal development. But at the same time, that really inspired me. I was like, I need to knock this out of the park. To not only prove it to myself, but to show him that I can do it on my own. And it has brought me connected to so many individuals like yourselves, and so I'm really actually thankful for that initially not such a great start.
So sounds like an awesome outcome, though.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm assuming you knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. I think I did better than I expected, if I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit.
Nice.
A lot of practice.
You have to do some of that, right? Definitely.
Either you other guys have something coming to mind?
Yeah, so I have an example where I was in a role for a while and things were going good, and I was looking on the horizon of like new tech that was up and coming, and this was specifically like Kubernetes, of course. It's
Okay.
gonna be in my example, right? And I went to my direct manager and some of the other leaders, and I was like, we need to invest in this. Like, this is up and coming. It's something that clients are using and are going to be using more and more. And basically got shot down, like, don't focus on that. Focus on the things that we're doing right now. The stuff that we're selling. It was a consulting organization. And so I decided, like, I'm going to invest in myself. So I spent the time learning, even invested like dollars in a program. It was a Microsoft program at the time, just to kind of ramp up on that, right? And then fast forward, I ended up becoming a lead for a region around containers.
Okay.
And it was because I took the time prior to invest in myself and start learning that technology and start like really just diving into that area. But had I not prepared when this opportunity came up, because this opportunity just came up out of nowhere because someone else moved, right, to another state.
Right.
If I wasn't prepared, if I didn't invest in myself and kind of manage my career, I wouldn't have been ready for that opportunity, right? And so I think, part of managing up is realizing it's your career, not other people's careers.
True.
And so you need to manage your career, right? And sometimes your vision or where you're going may not align with like your managers. Hopefully it aligns with it may not align with the organization.
The organization,
Well,
yeah, I was gonna
because
say.
leadership changes and things change. And so that's why you need to own your career, right? It's your career. It's not your career at a company or your job at a company. It's like your career long term.
I really feel that. So much about managing up is about what part of my relationship with my leader do I need to take the bull by the horns.
Right.
Because my example really comes down to communication. Early in my career, way before I got into tech, I had a manager who was a indirect communicator. And in their mind, they like to soften the blow. And so for me, it felt like a lot of beating around the bush, a lot of metaphors, similes, and everything in my brain is like, get to the point, get to the point. And our communication styles were so different that it actually led to misunderstandings about their expectations, about my standing. But I was very young, very early in my career, and it was years later before I recognized I need to communicate to my manager from the beginning how I communicate. So they know
Yes,
what
yes.
I'm saying when I'm saying it, as well as how I like to receive information, because it's a shared responsibility idea, right? Traditionally, we think of the manager-employee. The manager's there to make sure of the things, make sure you're doing your tasks in the way the company said, within a certain time frame. You're not breaking HR policy or cyber policy. They have these long lists of things that they're making sure of, but we don't nearly talk as often about the fact that the employee has things they have to make sure of as well. How is the leader leading me? How are they managing this team? How are they communicating with this team? And it's not a question of like we're trying to flip the power dynamic or have the patients run the hospital, but we want to make sure what is the best output we can get from each employee for the company. I have to consider the employee as an individual, and the only way they will know what they need to consider is if the employee takes that initiative right from the beginning, those very first one-on-ones, those first 90-day meetings, and say, here are some things for me that are really important that will help you to get the best out of me. I've already signed the dotted line, right? Here's the amount of dollars I'm getting this year. Here's how to get the most bang for your buck. You have to share those things.
Definitely. In my experience, I had experience working with a team where I was always getting this positive feedback from my manager all year long. He wasn't really as hands-on as I thought he would be, and I took that as okay, everything's going well. He never gave me any negative feedback. Then at the end of the year, they were like, they had to downsize, and then they were like, hey, so we have to let you go. We thought you were going to like be advancing more quickly. And it was literally like the polar opposite. And that wasn't what shocked me so much. What shocked me was my manager then coming to me after the fact and saying, oh yeah, I figured that was going to happen. And I'm just like, how does that work? You were the one. So I was so frustrated with that. And so when I went into my next company, I had a lot of ideas in mind of like, okay, this is how I'm going to like cover myself, I guess you could say. But I was in a very like supportive environment. So it was always, how can we help you? What can we do for you? But then I noticed like when I started, like you said, the one-on-ones, I started going to the one-on-ones, and my tech leaders, team leaders, great individuals, great mentors, but they didn't have a plan at all. They would just come in and say like, hey, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? So I started taking tips that I knew works for me personally and kind of giving them some guidance on here's how I work best. Like you said, it's communication and saying like, hey, so we can maybe kind of segue into like tips and strategies. But I would start off by saying, for me, one of the things that always sticks out is accountability is good for me. Like I have to publicly say, I'm going to do this thing. And it helps to know that other people are watching and looking for that follow up and that feedback. So I would come to my one-on-ones with my managers and say, hey, here is my weekly goal, or here is my monthly goal. Even if it was not for, like you said, you wanted to speak for an event. Even if it's not a company goal, you can give your managers your overall goals, and that you can have them hold you accountable for things. So I would say, hey, I wanted to speak at a conference and I need to prepare my talks. So I'm hoping that next week you will kind of like check in with me to see if I had actually did my outline of topics this week or if I covered my slides. Nice. So did you all like kind of employ any strategies like that as far as like managing your managers?
I want to piggyback on what both of you said, and this speaks to your story too. Like communication is key, and setting expectations. Like knowing what the organization wants to get out of you and what the team needs, but also communicating what your aspirations are, communicating throughout the year, and not being shy about like expressing where you want to go, some of the goals you want to hit, even if it's things that may not be related directly to your immediate role, like speaking, right? But communicating those, and it's okay to, talk about yourself and the things you accomplish. One of the things I do, and part of this was being an MVP at Microsoft for a long time, was I got really good at like writing down and tracking what I've done. So if I do something, like accomplish something, even if it was small, just like keep a log. Yep. And I've found like doing that at work is good too, because you can communicate that to your manager. And I do it throughout the year.
You have to. I've heard that before, right? Like when you go to try to apply for a new job, or you're trying to actually structure out your resume to be like more actionable in how you describe the work that you did, so you can call out, like you said, specific accomplishments, even if they're technical accomplishments. But we tend to, if we don't keep track of them, by the end of the year we forget, or if we want to negotiate or anything that we want to have in that conversation, we don't have the documentation prepared for ourselves.
And our managers are people just like us, right? So they're busy. Most of the time they're like super busy. So like, how can you make it easier for them to go talk about you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
When it comes time to like for performance reviews or whatever, like keep them updated throughout the year. So they're not like surprised, like, oh, I didn't know you did that, right? And then have something at the end of the year where it's like, this is like everything I did, and this is where I saved the company money or helped.
Right.
And don't worry about like, it's not. I know a lot of people are humble. It's not like bragging or anything like that. It's covering yourself, right? And it's ensuring that all of us, we do great work, and it's ensuring that we're able to communicate that great work that we're doing and making it known. Also, I tend to like communicate that kind of stuff to my boss's boss. And if I have relationships,
Pro tip coming up.
and if I have relationships with other leaders, which I recommend you network internally, not just externally, I tend to communicate that stuff with other leaders too, because you never know when another opportunity comes up, or the more that leadership knows who you are, the better the outcome, right? For you kind of long term with your career. But
Definitely. I really like that you said network within, because another thing I thought about of course, I had the bad experience and I was going into a great company, but I still took the time to keep a one-on-one relationship with our director of engineering as well. And so when new opportunities became available, he knew what my personal goals were. He saw, the things that I was doing and how I was working to grow. So he even tapped me a lot of times and said, hey, by the way, here's some documentation you should look into. Like, here's some other docs and guides, because it was R&D. So it's like, there's other things that the leadership knows that they're planning to do. Right. And they are like kind of thinking, how are we going to spin off a new team? But you've never heard, you're not a part of that conversation for sure. But, if folks know what's going on and they have those more direct relationships with you, it's easier for them to pull you in. So he was letting me know, like, hey, maybe read up on this document, read up on this spec, a lot of stuff that was in our drives and available to me, but I wouldn't know to do that. So, and just having those personal relationships with other people besides your managers, of course, they're great, but, you could do transfers to other teams and other parts of the org, so there's always that.
Yeah, the relationship with my director is how I got my manager role. Like I was saying, I actually don't really know what I want to do as a staff engineer. I could do, X, Y, and Z. Do I want to go more on the IC ladder? I was like, what I really enjoy every day is the mentorship and coaching aspect. And we kind of talked about it. It didn't actually come with, I want this particular thing. I was like, here are the things that I enjoy. And then we were able to kind of figure out what type of role that might be. Mm-hmm. So when one opened up, he was like, oh, I know who might like it. So I think it's also like you can manage your career without having a specific target in mind, but kind of knowing things that you like and things that you don't like.
That's really
and then
good.
Kind of figuring out what's the next step to try.
Yeah.
Nice. That's really, really good.
So, Lawrence, you transitioned and you like to help people transition as well. So have there been experiences that you've had where you're like, okay, this is how I need to let people know what's going on? And then you said you also transitioned from another industry, right?
Yes. What I'm thinking about right now, even as we sit here with this nice, beautiful, diverse group, like every corporation has a DE&I statement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Great statements, perfectly worded, policies associated with it. But the inaction of inclusion alone happens on a team and individual level. And the employee, the IC, the individual contributor, is actually the one who is empowered to make that happen. If I join some brand new team, it's important for me to communicate with my manager, here's how I like to feel inclusion. And when I feel included, you're going to get the best out of me for the company. You're going to get that. For me, it might be, I want to be included in some ERGs. Let's help work on this pipeline recruitment. For another person, they may not want to spend extra time for free in an ERG. They just want to be included in every conversation and make sure you invite me to all the things, because I'm not a member of that golf club, or maybe I don't go to that church, or that everyone else is a part of. Make sure I'm included in these ways. So that becomes really important in the transition.
Design discussions. I learned system design just by being in the conversations to actually design systems, right? I didn't know that that's what it was called. Now it's like a big thing, right? Or, just being able to have, sometimes teams do have team norm, discussions. I was on teams where every time a new person joined the team, our team leader's like, that means we have a new team. So you don't just tell everybody this is how we are operating as a team, but you redo the team norm discussion every time the dynamic changes. But if people aren't already doing that, maybe you can recommend it to your team. I was very much the most junior person, so I felt like maybe I didn't have as much to add, but then I found that a lot of times my value, especially to the team, was asking, why are we doing it this way and why not do it this way? Because people were overcomplicating things a lot of times, or things that I didn't understand. Just again, it's like the rubber ducky method almost. It helps other folks that were around kind of reevaluate if they already had a specific idea in mind. Maybe there's other options, so I don't know. I think it's fun, but I don't know if we have these conversations enough, and if there's specific strategies that that folks can go after, or maybe even red flags, because maybe we're talking a lot about the good things, but any red flags that you see if these aren't a part of the conversation?
I was just going to say, well, one reason you want to do it to avoid the red flags is it's relationship management, right? It's kind of coveyous. You want to begin the relationship with your leader with the end in mind. Let's not wait for the year in review for both of us to be surprised about our results to each other. And so the red flag would be the opposite of that. Like, we're not having the conversations. We're not setting up a structure for our conversation and relationship, which is what you really have with any leader or any manager. You have a relationship. Let's manage this together.
Right.
Here's my expectations. Here's some trigger points. I would like to stay away from these kind of things. Here's some areas I would love to get into, right? Any openings. Let me just put all that out there. And then from time to time, every 30 days, 90 days, whatever your review period is, bring them back up together.
That makes it way easier to kind of see when things are going off path.
Kind of carving a path, exactly.
Yeah, and writing it down.
Yeah.
'Cause we're forgetful people.
Yes.
Yeah, if they don't like to make a
Right.
doc, have them make a document, like a shared document,
Yeah.
that, because then you have the history of it too, because you'll forget. You come to the one-on-one, they're like, wait, what did we talk about last week?
I don't have anything. Get that 30 minutes back.
I thought you were going to add something, not for sure, but.
So red flags,
Yes.
or
Yes.
like positive things. So I think some red flags. So you've alluded to some good things, like a team that has like team norms.
They already have team norms.
Yep. If a team doesn't have that, like if a manager doesn't set like cultural norms for a team, that can be a red flag. It's good to get everyone from the team's input in creating those and like setting those and revisiting those. Even simple things like the team I'm on is, we have folks across time zones, different countries. And so setting simple things like, hey, what are the core hours for the team where folks are comfortable? Like, if you reach out, you'll expect a response, that sort of thing. Simple things like that, right? So if you're reaching out outside of these hours, but don't expect a super fast response. If you have a manager that's like taking the time to set those kind of things, and if you have a manager that sets one-on-ones, first of all, if you don't have one-on-ones, that's a red flag.
That is
Right.
a red flag.
Like if they're just non-existent, right?
If they cancel them often,
Yes.
don't let that go. Don't let that fly.
But like going to the one-on-ones, hopefully your manager has something, right, for you. But also I've found like it's a red flag if you go to the one-on-ones and it's just your manager talking to you the whole time.
That's exactly what my red
they-
flag was going to be.
Don't give you space as like the team member to communicate stuff that you might want to bring, because you might have something that you didn't communicate like during a team meeting or a more public forum, and you were saving it for that one-on-one, and then the manager talks the whole time and the meeting ends, you're like, oh, you
Still didn't get it out.
Yeah, I got to
like
wait for next week.
this burning thing, or you need clarification, right? That's a huge red flag if you don't have the time. Or I've never had this happen to me, but it's happened to someone I know where they went to their one-on-ones and like the manager just sat there and didn't say anything for like 30 minutes, but heard like typing on a keyboard. I mean, it's really weird, right?
Wow.
That's a red flag.
So that triggers an experience for me from a prior work experience. And the manager's just out of touch, very out of touch. And I realized that they did not have an environment where people could manage up. That wasn't even, no one was comfortable doing that. But they complained about the manager being out of touch. And here I am, new guy on the scene. There's already a precedent set. They're not listening to the ICs, right? They're giving directions. I'm that type of manager. And very ineffective and out of touch what's going on, which is sad. I'm not even sure what the remedy for
Yeah,
that
it
was.
just like hit me in my heart, but that's the reality of it. Like, not everyone is great at managing. A lot of times, like with a technical manager, the promotion paths can be kind of limited. I think for engineers, that has been said. So I know, we have just another minute here, but maybe we can talk more. I would love to further this conversation with y'all.
I just wanted to throw in, you triggered a thought too. You guys are having so many great comments, but It reminds me of one of my first leadership lessons I ever got in the restaurant business, and it was a conversation around can managers motivate employees. And everyone in the session was like, "Oh yeah, I love a great motivating manager." The facilitator was like, "No, no person can motivate another person. However, every leader is responsible for cultivating an environment wherein people can be self-motivated, and it's the employee's responsibility to describe what that environment looks like for them." That's the managing up.
That's the best way we can wrap it up now because we are out of time. I know.
That was great closing.
It was like we were just getting started. But yeah,
that was the warm-up.
That was the warm-up.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thanks
That was
for
fun. Learned a lot
inviting us.
myself.